Windows Server 2022. Welcome back everybody. I'm Prakash Vadan, your trainer for this entire series. In today's topic, we're going to talk about one of the important topics that comes in the form of your role for managing your distributed file system along with the namespace. This is very much important for every system administrator to learn how to manage their files that's been scattered over the network, or in order to manage or even to look after the backup of all the files and the folders over the network so that it will become your easier job. So let's see first, what is the DFS? What was the need of coming up with this new solution over here for the DFS rather than simply sharing the file over the network? Okay. Now, if you have a look over here in this image, you see that there are so many servers. Let's say Windows file server is 1, file server 2, file server 3, it can be anything. So now every server, they have shared a folder. So they might be target 1, target 2, target 3, so many files and folders it might be there over your network. But the problem over here, what comes here is, whenever any client tries to access the file that's been stored in a first server, so that user is supposed to provide with the IP address of that first server. And if the same time, the same user wanted to have access over some other folder, but that folder is being stored in some other server. So in that case, that user need to switch the IP address. That means, I mean to say that user need to provide with an IP address of the next server. So similarly, we have so many servers in a network, or it might be so many computers where the files are shared. So every time user wanted to have access over the shared resources in your network, that user is supposed to provide with the proper IP address. That means every time you'll have to go from one computer to next computer in order to access your file. Like I have given over here, if this folder is stored in this server, that means that might be your folder target 1. And this server is also sharing some of the resources, might be target 2. And this server is also sharing some of the files of the folder, that might be target 3. But what about the client, whoever is going to access for all of these resources in your network? That means they need to move from one computer to the next computer, because they are not working in online collaboration so that all of the files are stored in centralized location. We are talking about the local area network. So in that case, the Microsoft come up with the new solution that we call the DFS. Now, this DFS, as you can see, it's an acronym for Distributed File System. It is simply a set of client and server services. That means over here, client and server, they work together in order to have an easy access for your distributed files actually. That means if the file is stored in one computer or the second computer, the client can have easy access without switching from one computer to the next computer. So that's why using a Microsoft Windows servers to organize many distributed SMB file shares into a distributed file system. That means from one centralized location, all of these files and folders can have access by the client. Now, the main purpose of this distributed file system, let's see over here. Physically, all the files or the folders, they might be scattered in your network, as I've already mentioned. That means physically your files and folders might be located from one computer to the next computer. Now, when the client wanted to access those files, as I said, they need to switch from one computer to the next computer. Now, how about having a common one device, or having a one common name, so that all the clients, whenever they go to the centralized one server, they get access to all the files. Those are shared in different servers actually. So that is the most important beauty of this distributed file system. That means with the help of distributed file system in your local area network, no matter how many computers are sharing the resources, all of those shared resources can be accessed via one centralized server. That means if you see in this image, let's see, this is your DFS server, distributed file server, okay, distributed file system server. It is now over here, all of the files that is being shared in your network, okay, will be mapped to this one server. That means whenever this client one wanted to have access to a folder that's been shared by this computer, or the same client wanted to have access to the file that's been shared in the next server, this client has nothing to do with the IP address of the server 1 or the server 2. What is the prime factor over here for the client is that the most important thing for the client is that this client is going to access all of these resources via some other computer actually. That is the beauty of this distributed file system. That means all of the files, those are shared in the network, that will be mapped somewhere here with the another one server. That service we call it distributed file system. That means in easiest way, if I have to tell you, now the client has nothing to do with the main server where the file is located actually, or from where the client is trying to access the file. So they are going to have some alternate location. In that location, all of the files will be mapped actually. So rather than going to the server 1 to server 2 in order to access any kind of resources, now the client is going to hit only one particular IP address through which all the distributed files are shared via one centralized location. So that's gonna save a time of the client. That's gonna save a time for the backup. That's gonna save a time for your failover, and so many features are there with this DFS. Now the next question comes over here, then how this client is going to access with what name? Might be one IP or the name. Of course, we are going to access all of these resources via one name that we call a namespace. That means this distributed file servers, whatever files are being stored in one computer, we are going to access that file via the name of that server actually. Whatever name that we have assigned in the server, we are going to access that server with the via one name that we call a namespace. So we are going to hit one name. This is something like going over the cloud. It might be Gmail, it might be your Outlook, any mail service this provider. We simply provide the name of this mail provider, we hit over the cloud HTTPS, and we access our file. So similarly, we are not going to type the IP address of that computer where the files are stored. We are going to use one common name that we call a namespace. Okay, this namespace can be used with the DFS. Now I'm going to show you how to configure the DFS. Now how you can manage your files that's been scattered over the network with the help of distributed file system, and how this file can be accessed with the help of one particular name rather than going from one server to the next server, or rather than going to the IP address of the main server through which you are sharing the resources. So that was the basic concept of the understanding of your distributed file system. Now let's see how to configure this DFS so that it can help you to share all the scattered resources of the network via one server in the name of your namespace. Okay, now after having the brief introduction of this DFS and in namespace and its feature, the advantages that you utilize to your fullest in a Windows Server 2022, now the time to start the implementation of this DFS. Okay, so I'm going to show you from the ground. That means we are going to see step-by-step process of installing your DFS. So that's why let's go to the server manager first. Then I'm going to show you how to install this DFS role and how to configure, and rest of the things can be seen practically. So before that, if you remember in a theoretical portion what we discussed, that the main purpose of having this DFS and the namespace is that to access the file via one centralized location. That means the files might be stored in different locations. So for example, I would like to show you I have one server, that means this current server, where I have shared one folder. So let's see that practically so that you can understand or you can get the clear picture how this DFS can be utilized. So if I have to take you to my E drive, so there is one folder I have shared as a 200.200. That means from 200.200 I would like to indicate that this has been shared from the server. So if I have to show you my IP address, this is my IP address. That means you got the picture. This folder is shared from the 200.200. That's from the server. Now similarly, if I have to take you to my next machine, that might be your client. It's not mandatory to be a server even. Okay, it can be your workstation even. So over here, I have logged in as a server administrator because I do believe you understand that it requires a privilege. So that's why I have logged in via this authentication. Now if you see over here, I have shared another one folder, but this computer is 200.2. If I have to show you, okay, my exact IP address of this, so this should be something like 200.2. you see now 200.2. okay, now if I have to access the file that's been stored in a server, so let's access that server, and you see that that folder is shared. See this one, 200.200. Similarly, if I go to my server and I try to access the file from the different computer, okay, that is from the 200.2, and you'll notice that folder is shared from here also. Now we are going to see how these two folders that's been shared in a different locations can be centralized, and we can access from the same one centralized location. Okay, now for that, let's start first installing your DFS role. Okay, now for that, let the server this initial configuration test go for full. I do believe that still you remember the first screen that you get in the form of your dashboard. This time period is known as an initial configuration test. Okay, now I'm going to go to manage in order to add that role. Okay, add roles and features. Don't forget, it's a role. Next, we're going to work on a role base. This is the name of my server, this is my IP address, and this is my server operating system. Okay, now if I go to file and storage and I explore a bit further, you'll find that DFS namespace is there. Okay, now if you'd like to go for the replication as well, you can go for that also. There is no issue on that. Okay, but right now our concern is DFS. Okay, so let's go to next, and just to install this one. Okay, now, so it might take a few minutes in my system. Since you already know I have got so many server operating system over here. So after it gets installed, you'll find from the tools the DFS will get listed. So let's wait for a few more seconds, or it might be almost a minute. Then we'll get back how this DFS can be configured practical basis. DFS has been installed successfully and the system has been restarted. So after we restart the system, after the installation of DFS, now let's go to tools and have a look how does this DFS management look like. So now when you install DFS and you go for the first time, you'll find over here that DFS namespace will be empty because we have not created any namespace in order to centralize all the files and folder that's been shared. Now in order to do that, we have two options. Either you right click the namespace and select the new namespace, otherwise you can see at the right pane over here namespace. Any way you do, option is same. Okay, now let's go to create a namespace for the first time. Now since we are hosting a namespace for the first time, it's going to ask you to provide with the server that's going to host this service. So that's why I'm going to browse it and I'm going to point myself, that means this server, which is going to act as a DFS namespace server. That means that will be the server itself. Okay, so I'm going to select my server itself. So okay, now next, it's going to verify that this server does exist in order to host the service for this DFS namespace. So that's why it might take some time. Now it's asking you the common name actually. That means the name that you are going to provide over here will be the name for the namespace. And how they are going to access from the client side? Server and namespace name. Okay, or let's say the name I would like to give, let's say DFS server, for example. Okay, now how the clients are going to access? My server name and space DFS server. Okay, so if you'd like to go for another advanced setting, you do have option over here, but since we're in a lab environment, we are going to go as it is. Okay, so DFS server is the namespace name. Now after that, it's going to give you two options. Either you are going to host this one with the help of domain-based namespace or standalone namespace. Okay, and of course most probably we are going to talk about the domain-based namespace, so that's why I'm not gonna waste your time talking about this thing. So how the clients are going to access this DFS name? DFS server is the name of your namespace and this is the name of your domain. So let's go to next. Now I hope there shouldn't be any issue over here. So let's click the create and it should be well to go. So it's in progress. So wait for a few more seconds. Congratulations. Now successfully the DFS namespace has been hosted over here in your server. Now how does it look like? Now see, if I go to this DFS namespace over here, this is empty. Okay, there's nothing so far. So in that case, what we do now, we are going to add a files or the folder that we are going to access through the client. So that's why you have again two options, right click and a new folder. That means whenever any client tries to access over this DFS namespace server, they need to have certain folders over there. That means that will be work as a centralized file server. Now in order to add the files, you have option again, right click and new folder, or at the right hand side also you do have option. So by the way, let's have a look. How does it look like your namespace server? So we're going to write a server name. So our server name is testing.com and the name of DFS server is DFS server itself. Since it is already hosted, so it's going to make a list it over here automatically. Now but that should be empty. Why? Because we have not published any files and folders. See here, it's empty. Okay, so no need to be panicked because we have created a DFS namespace over here. It's successfully implemented, but the objects, or I mean to say the folders or the files, are not being added in this namespace. So we are going to add it, right click and new folder. And as I told you that whenever we add files or the folders in order to share it with the help of the centralized file server in a form of DFS namespace, you need to make sure that where that files and folder exist actually. So I'm going to use some of the files of the folder that is hosted in my server itself. So I'm going to add it, I'm going to browse it, and which computer? This computer. Don't forget, we do have other computers in a network. If you have a look over here, browse, and I go to advanced and I go for search, that means no matter how many computers are, the part of your network in your domain, they all are going to be listed over here. And whichever computer is, trying to share the folder, that can be mapped to this DFS server. So you'll have to select that server. So currently I'm going to share a folder that is in my server itself. So I'm going to select this server. Now, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to click this show shared folders. These all are the shared folder in my network. So which folder should I share? Okay, let's go for the image. There's one folder name image. Okay, so I'm going to share it and it's asking you the name. Okay, let's go for next. Now it's asking you to give a common name over here. Okay, so let's say first share. You can write anything you want. Okay, done. Now if you notice over here, the first share name folder is been listed over here. That means your DFS namespace has been successfully completed. Now in order to make sure whether it's working or not, let's go to the namespace again and press enter, and boom, you get a folder that you say. Remember, you wrote a name first share, so that name is listed over here, and inside that folder there was one file. So this way, what you can do, you can share a folder. Now what about if you'd like to add a folder that is in other computer? So the same process, right click, new folder, add, browse. Again you browse, you go to the computer where files and folders are shared, okay, and you select the computer, and if you have any shared folder over there, you'll be able to add it over here in a list. So that's why now all of the clients who are the part of your network in this client server architecture, with the help of this your domain that's been hosted over here, they'll be able to access it. Now it's not only that you give the full name of your domain, you can also write the first part of the domain as well. If I remove .com, let's see what's going to happen. See, it's the same thing. Whether you write your domain name .com or you write the first part of the domain, it's going to help you to display the content. So this way you can add a files in a folder that's been shared or scattered in 2, 3 or so many different locations in your network, so that whenever any client they are trying to access your files of the folder in a server, they can have the centralized location, so that they don't have to switch from one computer to next computer in order to access the files and folders. So I hope it was a bit informative to you to deploy DFS namespace in Windows Server 2022. If you find it fruitful, please do like and subscribe. Thank you.